Welcome. Thank you guys for coming in. So my name is Sydney, marriage and family therapist. I do want to give y'all kind of a couple of disclaimers before we get started today. So first, everything that you say in here will remain confidential, except in cases of if you're going to hurt yourself or others. In that circumstance, I would need to report it by my license. Second piece is we have a mirror here, and so behind that is a panel of other clinicians who's going to be listening to some of the processes that we're engaging in, and then we'll pause for a second and listen to their reflection and feedback. And I think I'm going to invite you guys to what sticks out. Is there anything that's coming up or surprised you? And we can kind of touch more on that as well. So, do you guys have any questions for me before we get started? No? Okay. So, what kind of brings you guys in today?
We just seem to be having issues because he doesn't believe in my parenting skills, I guess, at this point. We have a son living at home. He's 21. He's currently in recovery. He's been in recovery on and off probably since he was about 16.
Oh, wow.
And apparently I'm the enabler in this situation because no matter what I do, it's wrong.
Okay. Have you been called an enabler before by other people, or is this kind of the first time
No.
you're hearing that word?
Yeah. It's
First time.
Mhm.
Okay. Sure.
The
And-
first time, she consistently babies him. He's 21 years old.
So you're saying we've heard this word before?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So from your perspective, kind of what's going on? What's the problem?
She doesn't want him to grow up. He's a grown man. He's 21 years old. He needs to get on his feet, go out of our home, and she's constantly allowing him to hang over her head that something bad happens to him. Well, he's not doing the things he needs to do.
Okay.
And she's at her beck and call all the time.
But he is doing it. He does it when he's ready to do it. I don't want to push him.
Well, okay, so pause for a second. So just to be clear, like the understanding of what's going on is from you, I'm hearing a little bit of tension in the marriage because of some conflict based on how you're parenting. Is that correct?
Mhm.
And then for you, it's the conflict is her parenting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what's your son's name?
Greg.
Greg. And so where's Greg in all of this?
Home, probably sleeping in his bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. How old is Greg?
21.
21. Okay. And so he's kind of at a phase in his life where,
He needs a job.
okay, sure. What's,
He does get jobs, but then he gets fired because of his background check coming back.
Or because he gets high.
okay.
It's not always him getting high.
So you guys are kind of in this pattern, right? Where Greg's up here and you guys are navigating how am I going to help Greg, right? Or Greg needs to get out, or Greg needs
He
to get
doesn't
well.
help do anything.
It's my money you continue to give him.
Are we talking about Greg, or now we're back to?
He doesn't do anything for Greg.
He's
You-
living under my roof. He's
So-
eating my food.
So I'm seeing this like triangle that you guys have, where Greg is really pinning you guys against each other. Is that fair?
Yeah. I feel like that's the only issue.
Greg is the only issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because he doesn't understand what it's like to be an addict. He doesn't get it. I grew up
No,
around
I
it.
know. I'm not an addict.
Wait. So it's Greg is our child.
Yeah.
Okay. Remind me of y'all's names because I want to be clear
Rochelle,
on
I don't.
Greg.
Oh.
that. You're Greg Senior and we've got Greg Junior. Okay. So that's where I was getting a little lost here. Okay. So Greg Junior struggles with addiction. Where has Greg left the house before? Greg Junior?
Yeah, a couple
He has.
times.
Well, he left.
Well,
the
I mean,
house
like, to
on the
indi-
streets.
Okay. So he's never had successful independent living.
No.
Okay.
But he's successful when he lives with us. He's not
How is
homeless.
that successful?
He's he's not on the streets. He's not potentially gonna die because of who he's hanging around or what he ends up doing,
So are you just gonna be around him for the rest of his life?
if that's what it takes.
So back to Greg. So I'm sensing a lot of tension in y'all's
If
relationship.
that's what it takes, she's okay with letting him be 45 living in our house, if that's what it takes.
Okay. And so,
Where does that leave our life, our retirement, and what good does that do for him? What kind of life is that?
It's
so hang on here. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing with you guys, right, is again, a lot of focus on Greg. And so I'd be interested to get to know each of you a little bit more. And so, I mean, I heard you mention a second ago that you have addiction in your family. And so I guess to get a little bit into your experience, what was it like growing up for can you tell me other times in your life where you've had addiction present?
my entire life, really. My mom was a heroin addict. So when she was coming down, she would beat me. I was always the one that, she would come down on and do things to. And she did get sober when I was about 11. I lived with my grandparents, and, that was rough because my grandfather's also an addict. He's an alcoholic, and, it's a
Wow.
lot. And my mom's parents weren't there for her, so I want to try to be there for my son so he doesn't go down the same route that my mom went down.
Wow. So you've got a lot of experience with kind of this heightened state of, chaos, right?
Mhm.
Constant chaos, constant anxiety, that fear that you were sharing about with your son Greg. It sounds like it even started with like your grandparents, maybe,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so has your mom shared a little bit about what that was like for her growing up?
She doesn't really ever talk about it. My grandpa wasn't there for her. My grandma wouldn't allow it, so she doesn't think it has anything to do with him. Of course, he's the great parent in this situation. So,
Your grandfather?
yeah, and my grandma was also a drug addict, so it just runs through everybody. And I feel like they've all failed at life, and I think it's because no one was there for each other.
Okay, so a lot of, in that system, everybody kind of emotionally just cuts off, right? Whether that's escaping into addiction, when the conflict rises,
Mhm.
it's just everybody is going to escape,
Mhm.
if you will. Okay, and then so you grew up with addiction in your household as
Mhm.
well.
Yep.
Okay, and you said 10 or 11 was when she got sober.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a really young age to experience that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but once I got older and I realized what it actually was, and they actually told me what it was. But there's been times that my mom came to my grandparents' house when I was living with them when she was supposedly in rehab, and she had bruises all over her because she got beat up by the drug dealer, and it was, so it's a constant cycle, and that's what the problem is I want to protect my kid and not have things be like that and not have him be kicked out of my house.
So at a very young age, you've had this anxiety
Mhm.
right here,
Mhm.
and how did you deal with that when you were younger?
I lashed out, fought people, went to jail a couple times.
Okay. So emotional explosion.
Mhm.
Okay. And so is that how you would say that you kind of deal with conflict today?
I don't think so. I think I'm a bit calmer about it.
Okay.
But when it comes to my kid, maybe a little bit.
Okay. So when the anxiety is starting to get up to here, specifically with, I guess, the welfare of your kid, the idea of your child being hurt or being in some of those violent situations, what's
Controls
the
our
reaction?
whole world. So when he's doing good, she's doing good. When he's doing bad, she's doing bad. When he disappears, she can't even function.
Okay. But to the point of like this anxiety, what's your reaction of emotional, like how do you have that release?
I don't. I think that's why we have so many issues, because I'm not getting rid of it, and then so it's causing problems between
Okay.
Senior and I.
Well, and Greg, you were saying that a lot of
We don't even have a relationship. The relationship is her and our son. world, and then if everything's okay, then I can participate in her life. But if it's not, she's just constantly in this whirlwind of trying to figure him out, fix him, protect him, do this. She doesn't even have a life outside of that. That's
She's
her life. That's her
really
whole life.
enmeshed.
That's our whole life.
Yeah. Okay. And so I mean, is that something that you would agree with? That if your son's not doing well, you're not well?
Well, I mean, he's my kid. He is my life.
I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on Greg Jr., right? Your well-being and his well-being?
I mean, I don't really talk to him about that. I mean, I wouldn't say that if he was sitting in this room. I wouldn't say that because I wouldn't want him to feel that pressure. But I mean, I don't think I'm putting any pressure on him. All the pressure is being put on me because I'm trying to fight for him constantly in my marriage and at home. Obviously, I'm having to help him with the addiction, and I'm fighting the addiction with him in a
Right.
sense, and then
And you're babying him. You're out looking for him, picking him up. You make him breakfast.
Well, Greg,
You,
I want
it's
to
ridiculous.
pause you here because I'm super interested to hear about your upbringing. And so, I mean, you guys, sounds like you guys come from really different worlds. I'm interested to hear, I mean, what was it like for you growing up?
My dad was hardworking. He was gone all the time. He went out and had beers or whatever, came home. My mom fed him, and they went to bed, you know, and
no idea.
we didn't, I don't know, we didn't have issues like this. We
Okay,
didn't
so back to your dynamic a little bit more, right? So, sounds like your sister, does your mom work?
my mom worked, yes.
Your mom worked. Okay, so your mom worked, your dad worked as well,
Yes.
would go,
Has his own business.
okay,
He'd go out with the boys, have a couple beers after work every day, and come home. They have
Okay.
dinner. It wasn't this whole worried about where people are and if they're in the streets.
Well, I'm hearing from you that it doesn't, sounds like your memory of childhood was your dad really wasn't there.
He had a business he was running to feed all us, take care of us.
Okay. And where did you get, how did you feel as a child?
I felt fine. I mean, we played with our friends in the streets. We had everything we needed.
Can I challenge you for a second? Because fine's not really an emotion, and so when you think about,
I don't understand why this has to do with our son.
you don't understand why what has to do with your son.
Why you're asking me all these questions. We're here for my son.
Yeah. I mean, so
that's part of the problem.
well, one thing that we really know is that in generations, there are a ton of patterns that happen, passed on from generation. A lot of times we don't even recognize that this has been passed on.
So you're saying my problems passed down his drug issue.
No, I'm saying a lot of the way that we handle big emotions, anxieties, fears, frustrations is passed down from generations, right? The nature versus nurture. You know, I genuinely believe that we're all doing the best we can with the information that we have. And so a big piece of that is breaking down what are some of my patterns? What are some patterns that I don't particularly agree with, and how do I move forward from here? Does that make sense?
Sure.
You seem a little frustrated.
Yeah. Well, this is why I didn't want to come to this.
Yeah, but we need to.
We'll say more. What part of that is, what's coming up for you right now that makes
That
you?
whole, your family problems are going to cause your son's. Our problem is our son's a drug addict.
Yeah, but maybe he became a drug addict because you put so much
Well,
pressure on
hang
him.
on. Could you say that one more time? Because I think I missed it.
Our son's a drug addict. That's what we should be discussing and figuring out how she can move on with her life.
Okay.
So we can have a life together again.
That's important to you.
Yeah. We planned for this. We had all these things. He was going to be out of the house and graduate from high school, and now he'll never be out of the house.
Okay. So I'm hearing from
And
you.
it's embarrassing. 21 years old and he's in the house. We're taking care of him. We're feeding him.
Yeah. I'm hearing from you. You're unhappy with your current living situation.
Definitely.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Even when he wasn't at the house, he wasn't happy with the current living situation. because it was,
You weren't
you're
living.
always worried about him, blah, 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 blah. Aren't you supposed to be worried about your kids? Like, no matter what. Like, if his life was different and he went to college, we'd still be worried about him. At least I would.
Well, I would hope you wouldn't be looking in the streets for him and seeing what date he's on and bringing him food and
So you
he's in
just
college.
want to wait until we see him on the news and saying that he's dead or something? I can't do that.
So again, I want to bring back to this piece of, I mean, you guys have so much tension and conflict surrounding Greg Jr., right? I mean, Greg Jr. is, what did you say Greg Jr. is probably doing at home right now?
Sleeping.
And you guys are not having this piece of connection where you're able to get on the same page, right? And I think a big piece of that too is recognition of where we come from. And so, I mean, Rochelle beautifully shared a lot of her past trauma with her family. And so, what came up for you when you were hearing her talk about that?
I know that's hard for her. We've talked about that, and I've tried really hard to make a home where she feels safe and doesn't have to deal with that. And I support whatever she wants to do with her family now. So.
How do you think that may have affected her parenting today?
Well, yeah, she doesn't want to see her kid go down the same path her other family has, but he already has. So we didn't fix that.
Okay. So that's a really great point, right? Like, here we are in this cycle, and so.
And even the other therapist we went for him told you can't stop this.
I can't stop it, but when he's sober, why can't we just be happy? Why can't we just be living our lives normally?
Because
and
if I
be
wanted
there
to go out to
support
dinner
him?
tonight, you wouldn't want to go because you'd be so worried. What if he goes out tonight and gets high? What if someone comes over? What if?
So why can't we just have dinner at home as a family? Why do we have to go out to do it?
So correct me if I'm
You
wrong.
could cook.
Hang on one second. What I'm hearing you say is her well-being is dependent on Greg Jr., right? And would you say that's fair? We've identified that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so what is something that you think might be helpful into getting that level of distance from you guys, from you and Greg Jr.?
I think maybe not having so much pressure about me doing things for him. Maybe it's because I feel like that's why I'm here, is to help him, but then I have so much pressure, it makes me want to help him even more, and I feel like I'm being pushed away. Senior.
Pressure to do what?
To not take care of my kid.
Okay. So, like, we've identified Greg Jr., if he's doing good, you're doing good, right? And I feel like you've also kind of mentioned he needs you to be able to do good. And I guess I want to challenge you to think about what pattern do you think that he might end up in when you're no longer here?
I mean, I don't know. He'll probably go off the deep end because his dad doesn't support him. But, I mean, there needs to be a happy medium. Like, why do we have to just kick him out of the house and not be there for him? Why can't we find a happy medium to help him?
Do you think Greg Jr. has the ability and capability of being successful in life?
Yes.
Okay. What actions
Not if you
do you
keep
hang
doing
on
the
one
thing
second.
you're doing.
One moment. What action do you take in order to show him that you trust that he can do it?
I'm not down his back, making him do things, forcing him to do things. I don't throw his sobriety in his face or say anything about his drug use all the time.
Sure, but how does he know he can make it? What piece of that?
I don't know how he can make it. He's not here, but I mean, he seems to be making it now, so there's something right going on.
What is he doing?
What would you like to see?
Him get a job.
Okay.
Him have some responsibility. Him be on a path to being on his own and independent. Living in our house, staying sober is not independent. You're making him do these things. You're coddling him. And it's still not going to stop it, because how many times have you done this and he's went back on the street?
Yeah, but he's tried, and he's tried getting jobs, and his background, because of the decisions he's made, stealing cars, going to prison, and he's a felon, and it's hard for him to get a job, and he's asked to borrow money so he can go to
So I
school and
think
become
we've
a
circled
mechanic.
back, you guys, to Greg Jr.'s the problem. Right? Do you both think that it's fair that there are areas that you could work on to kind of distance yourself from how Greg Jr.'s doing?
Yes.
So yes for you.
Maybe.
Okay. Is it important for you to maintain this relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
This relationship or Greg Jr.?
You guys.
Yes.
Okay. And so what are you wanting out of your relationship?
To not be fighting all the time, and not to feel like I have to pick sides between my husband and my kids. My kid.
I want a relationship with someone that can think outside of protecting their child. That
Okay.
could think about us, that could go to dinner.
Tell me about a time in your life when you felt protected as a child.
My whole life.
Okay. Can you say more about that?
I had a home, a roof over my head, I knew food was coming, I was fine.
Okay, so consistency, security, and so when you went from 18 to young adult, what was that period of life for you like?
I worked for my father,
Okay.
and now I own the business and I'm doing the business, so
Okay.
So why can't we let him work with you?
we tried that.
We'll pause, and so I want to hear more about young adulthood, right? Was that a challenging period for you?
No,
Okay. So you're kind of questioning why is my kid struggling so much?
sure.
Okay. And tell me about for you. When was a time in your life where you felt safe as a child?
I would probably say when I snuck my mom into my grandparents' house just so she could have somewhere to sleep, and so we were sleeping in the same bed.
That closeness,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you had control over your mom's safety.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like when you were 10 and younger, you didn't have a whole lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I understand, I want her to feel that safety with him in the house. We just need to be working towards something else. It can't just be about protecting him and coddling him. And at some point, we have to stop with the threat of something bad happening. We're still not protecting him from that.
What are some things that make you feel safe today?
Knowing that my son is in my house.
Outside of your son? Because I mean, in reality, a lot of times you can't control his decisions, right? And so for you, what's something that makes you feel safe and secure?
I don't really know. I've never thought about it.
Okay.
Because I don't ever think about myself. I put everyone else before me, so I don't really think about it.
Okay. Do you know in airplanes when they talk about in an emergency, whose oxygen mask do you put on first?
It's supposed to be mine.
Mm-hmm. Why do they say that?
Because we need to be protected in order to help other people.
Yeah. And so for the same piece, can you, or what comes up for you when you think of, like, how do I protect myself? How do I give myself oxygen so I can best support my family?
I don't know. Like, I don't ever think about it because I do things for myself, but I don't.
She doesn't.
Yeah.
And it makes me, that's what I don't like. You're not happy. You're not yourself. You're not living.
It's because I'm always worried about everything else, so I don't protect myself first. I feel like helping everyone else is my protection.
Well, I mean, to be fair, right? Like, you've had a traumatic childhood, and this is essentially re-traumatizing you. I mean, you're in survival mode 24/7. And so for you, what do you do with that fear? What are some things that you can do to help support yourself in that?
I mean, I guess try to not be there for everyone else so much. but I don't know what that would look like for me. It scares me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the end result going to be?
And so for you guys,
We have no control of the end result. It's not that I don't love my son.
right,
And it's not that I'm not fearful of his life either.
right,
But I feel like she's throwing away her life because he's throwing away his life.
right. That's fair. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So what we know a lot about family systems, right, is that codependency piece of it, right? And it's a natural thing that happens in with addiction present. And so when we talk about dysfunction, I mean, I know that's a scary word, but what it typically means is over-functioning or under-functioning in your role. And so for you, I mean, it sounds like you are over-functioning in your son's life and under-functioning in your own. And so working to figure out where that balance is going to be super important. So we're at that point in the session where we're going to hear from our reflection team. And so, I mean, I really want to challenge you guys to listen to what's being said. I mean, is there something that surprises you or brings something up emotion-wise? And then we can kind of work in it in session. Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Alright. We have Greg Senior and Rochelle here who are struggling to come to terms with, I guess, the impact of their son's addiction and recovery and what it kind of has brought into their lives. What questions or observations do you have?
Well, I noticed the dad's defensiveness and the reluctancy to talk about his past. Like what I'm curious about is that, you know, he says that his childhood was perfect or healthy, but what expectations were placed on him? Did he have a chance to ever make mistakes, and was he and how did that look like when he was growing up? Like
I heard Greg Senior say, you know, like you're not living, and then she happened to say that why can't we just live normally? I'm just curious if everything was peachy with Greg Jr. Well, what would she do? What would she fill her time with that's good? What would living normally look like for her? She completely lost track of what she enjoys. What would she do to be living normally?
What does normal look like?
And what does normal even look like if she's not the focus? What does normal look like anymore?
another thing too is like he kept bringing up like his son's living at home and you know he doesn't have a job, but realistically in this day and age, like compared to when they were born in the 70s, maybe 80s, it was quite different. You know, now we do have kids that are living at home longer because the cost of living is too high. So what's the difference? Like if we're talking about the son living at home, Junior living at home, would it make a difference if he did have a job, if he, you know, if he was productive? Is it bad just because he's suffering through addiction? And does that make Senior feel like a failure because his son didn't turn out like perfect?
Yeah, I actually would piggyback on that too, because I was kind of thinking something similar, which is that, like, both parents are, I think the kid doesn't have a job, okay, but both parents are essentially doing the same thing. It's not like either one of them is like, you know, if Greg Senior's not exactly fighting and pushing him to go get a job, so even if he had a job, what dynamic would that change? And what is Greg Senior doing that's so much better and so much different to provide for the kid, to push him in the right direction? What is he doing that's being blocked or stopped?
Or is he kind of checked out?
Or has he stopped trying?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see if Greg Junior's been to like some rehab in the past and it's not worked. So if it's like how many times, if it's once, twice, and then it's the same thing keeps happening. Okay, well, it didn't work, so you're coming back home. Like, it's just, this cycle just keeps
Mhm.
repeating itself. Where do we feel like in the cycle, could we interrupt it to make it something, a different outcome?
They both see like their efforts as being the solution and the other person is
Right.
kind of creating the problem,
Mhm.
right? So like I get Greg's been very clear about you're coddling him, you're just making it worse. And she's saying, I have to be here for him, this is what helps him. Um, and I think implied with that is if you were helping too, then maybe that would be enough.
I wonder if that's a void because she couldn't help her mother. You know, like she said, the one thing that she felt safe was the day that she was allowed to have her mother stay with her in bed, and she felt safe. I wonder if like her trying to be so protective with her son is a way to kind of fill that void that she felt when she was younger.
Well, I think it's really defined by her worth, in a sense, the way that she was
Mhm.
is really, I think, the key component for her, that she cannot be a failure for her if she doesn't save him, so to say, that she's a failure. It's her worth. It's tied to it in some way, I think. I'm certainly curious about that.
Yeah, she's clearly in like overdrive trying to
Yeah.
do all this stuff. I think that's one of the really big challenges with addiction is you can do everything right and it still doesn't,
Mhm.
it still, boils down to that person.
Absolutely.
It's like an honest thing. It's sort of like, we know with like family support, whatever, that like, and support from the system, that's a person's best opportunity at recovery, but it's also not a guarantee.
Right.
We know that if those things aren't in place, like
It's
recovery's
for
not
sure
not
yeah,
gonna work.
right.
And so it's like this delicate
Balance.
thing to
Yeah.
think about. That you can do everything right and still won't be enough.
Still won't be successful.
I'm also curious on what the relationship is with the father and son, and how was that relationship prior to the addiction, or
Yes.
and during the addiction now? Like, how has it changed? Does he feel like he could interact with his son in the same way, or is there a disconnect?
I saw a lot of kind of you you're this, you're coddling him, and then her saying, you're not doing enough, or you don't seem to care, you just wanna leave him out on the streets. And I just wonder if there's, opportunities for them to kind of own their own statements, like about themselves and where they're at and what they're experiencing, and less, there's a fair amount of finger pointing here, so, maybe if there are opportunities to steer away from that, for the clients to, I guess, own their own experiences.
I'd be curious because he's had jobs, but he's been fired because of his background checks, she said. So when he was working, in that window of time when he's working, how is he different than when he's not working? So what is he, I don't know, was it better? Did it feel like he had a purpose to his day, he felt fulfilled, and then he gets fired, and then it's this vicious cycle of, well, I'm not good enough, so does that trigger anything for Greg Jr.?
Actually, that was really interesting because now that makes me wonder if it's like not necessarily like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but he's finally making his dad proud. So I wonder if the pressure kind of mounts, because that's like the bar his dad has set is you will be successful once you do this, and then he does it. Does the dynamic change? And
Yeah.
then how is Greg Jr.? I mean, like, he's an adult, like he's their child.
Right.
So why is he managing that need from his dad? Really interesting.
When did Greg Jr. get into drugs? What was going on there that it even began? I guess sometimes I'm just curious where that began, what was going on with the couple and the family in that situation. But family life she had was so, she didn't have the support, and so it's like, is she overcompensating?
And we keep looking at the number 21, he's 21, but kids, the people at 21 really are not they're not adults, and I mean, they are adults technically by law, but like they still need support from their family, they're still looking for that guidance, because if you're like throwing them out in the woods or whatever.
To the
and-
wolves.
Yeah, to the
Yeah.
wolves,
Yeah.
and it's like,
But
they
boundaries
still-
can be set.
And they're barely
There
adults,
can
right?
be, like, yeah.
I guess, it depends on the culture, I guess.
Yeah.
I also, like, is he behind? Because maybe he missed some really important social or societal milestones, because he did get started on his addiction kind of in the middle of his teenhood. Maybe he didn't learn like appropriate work skills like most 16-year-olds would. He didn't get his driver's license. There's so many things that could have set him back where maybe he's not prepared for the adult world, whereas someone who hadn't experienced addiction and multi-generational addiction
Mm-hmm.
might have those skills at that point.
I think I wanna know more about, mom, and she mentioned how she never does things for herself. And if that's been more of like a recent thing, or if that's always been kind of her jam. So
Does she
maybe
have to take care of her mom? So maybe she's always been in a caretaker role, right?
Yeah.
She's never been able to be
Yeah.
a child, really.
Right, and I think that Greg kind of wants more for her, and kind of maybe exploring that a little bit more.
I'd like to hear more from Greg about, his experience growing up. Like, I feel like, I could be wrong here, but like the way he described it, everything was fine, I had a roof over my head, I was fed, and so forth. And I was just thinking to myself, like, well, what else? Right? And I just, you know, may not apply to Greg, but I've heard so many people have that sort of explanation of, their experiences growing up, for example, like when they've had abuse in their life. And they say, well, I couldn't feel sorry for myself because I had a home and I had meals and so on and so forth, so it wasn't that bad compared to some of the people I know. So I don't know, I just felt like there, you know, maybe it was great, sunshine and rainbows, and, I just, you know, experience hearing people have similar descriptions when there's been some pretty, intense stuff in their lives.
Like my needs were met, so it was good.
Yeah, so who am I to complain?
Yeah, yeah.
Or even in the presence of his wife, when he knows that she has had such a tumultuous childhood, he doesn't feel like he can express things about his own traumas, even if he might see them as little T traumas, even if they were big T, because hers was big T trauma.
Or if, you know, if it was just, you know, smooth sailing,
Yeah.
what kind of disconnect does that leave them with between them in terms of trying to come to terms with those different lived experiences?
But when he talks about his father, like there was, it seems like there was expectations, or like he went, you know, his dad, you know, you work, you provide for the family, he had to go work with the dad, or he worked with the dad, like there's this like need for kind of perfection, or, I don't know, maybe.
Addiction aside, like I imagine, I mean, that's obviously a very important piece here, but I also, I can imagine a number of parents who would be worried about their 21-year-old kid living at home, and not, for example, not having a job or not doing something to kind of try and launch, right? So there's this piece of it that developmentally is kind of still a challenge for parents, even when addiction isn't in the equation. So just, you know, wanting to give credence to that. So, anything else? All right, hand it back. See what the clients think about what we should.
So, Greg, I'm gonna start with you. What came up for you? What was most surprising? Hard to hear.
he wasn't using drugs, he should have a job at 21.
Okay. So the, I guess, I also heard in that maybe concern, do you have concern about,
Yeah, I was the manager at our store by 21.
sure, but I mean, I guess my question to you is what's the concern for Greg Junior that you have? That he's at home, he's 21, doesn't have a job, will take addiction out of it, right? And so, what's that
Yeah,
concern?
how's he going to, he needs a life. That's not a life, just laying around the house, having your mother
So I
cook
guess
and
let me,
clean. I'm concerned that my son's not going to have his own life and
okay,
get married, have kids, whatever he wants to do, travel, do other things.
I mean, and one kind of beautiful thing I just heard you say was whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I mean, I didn't have that choice, so
okay, what choice or what was presented to you as a child?
to take the store, run the
Okay.
store, that's what we did in our, you know. My dad needed me to help him and then he got sick and I took the store.
Okay. If you didn't have to take the store, what were some things that you wanted to do?
I wanted to go to college.
Okay. What would you have liked to study?
I wanted to play football. I was a good football player in high school. That's where we met.
Okay. You still play football?
Nope.
No? When did you stop?
My junior year to work at the store.
Oh, so when you took on the expectations of your parents, you quit doing what you love.
Yeah, that's what you do when you're part of a family. You do the right thing.
Can
A
I
man
ask-
has to stand up and do the right thing, take care of their family.
Okay. So it sounds like you're really stepping into this expectation of what a man should be. Okay. And that's a big burden to take on. I mean, it sounds like you're taking on the expectations of your father, quite possibly even his father, of what a man is.
Yeah, that's what a man is. That's what we should do.
What are
I mean,
some
how
of those,
lucky was I to get a business handed to me? I should be thankful for that.
what were some of those qualities of what a man is? What are some of those things?
Works hard, stands on their own 2 feet,
Okay.
takes care of their mother, not their mother take care of them.
Okay. And so, back to what you were hoping for your son. I heard you say whatever he wants to do. And so, are there
Yeah, I mean,
parameters?
he did sports, I coached him, he did all kinds of stuff. And, I mean, when he first had a problem and we found out about it, I was the one that went out in the streets and got him. You act like I didn't help him ever. I was there first.
Yeah, but
I
you
was
also,
doing those things, and then you can only do that so many times. I can't just keep getting him and letting him do the same thing over again to me.
but
and to
he
you,
is doing the same
and
thing.
hurting you.
He is doing the same thing over and over again because he has so much pressure. He can't deal with the sobriety and having so much pressure to be this man that
Well-
you think that he should be.
Do you think that you are applying pressure?
To get a job, yeah. To be a man, to not do this. Look at her. She's a wreck. Do you think I want to see my wife broken and hurt by her own son every day?
What do you want to see?
I want to see her smile back on her face.
Okay. If you can, I guess I'll go to you. If you can speak to a time when you remember having a smile on your face, what was going on?
I would say when we were actually a family, when we were all on the same page, when our son was young, I would probably say 7 or 8, like things were great.
So when you say same page, can you break that down a little bit more for me? What were some of the values that both of you guys agreed on?
I mean,
As
there was a
parents.
lot that we agreed on. I mean, he started doing sports early on, and I feel like at that age it wasn't so much pressure as to where as he got older and better at things, it became so much pressure. And instead of being the dad that he needed at that time, it was the coach, and he wanted dad, not the coach. And then I feel like it was pressure on me to try to protect him, like always. Our whole lives are literally around me protecting him. I would say, except for newborn to 8 years old, our lives were amazing. And I was smiling all the time, and things were great, and I was a stay-at-home mom. And now I feel like I stay home, and she puts so much pressure on him. He puts so much pressure on him to get a job that I feel like I should just go back to work. So then maybe that will take the burden, because it's always my money.
Well, so I heard you say that he puts a lot of pressure on. And so what does that look like for you? What does that pressure look like?
Pressure for me, or pressure being put on Craig Jr.?
So maybe I misunderstood. Were you saying that?
So the pressure is being put on Craig Jr. for
Okay.
having to get a job all the time, like as if it's a financial burden. So
Well, can I challenge you on that? Because that sounds like it's a little bit between Greg Sr. and Greg Jr. And so where is that? How are you taking that on?
because I feel like I have to protect Craig Jr.
Well, where does that come from?
Just being a mom. And Craig Jr. coming to me about how strict his dad is and how he doesn't feel comfortable going to him because it's always, you need to get a job, you need to move out of the house.
Outside of protection, what are some other things, roles that a mom is to fill?
I mean, being there emotionally, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I mean, I do the cleaning and cooking and all of that stuff.
Okay, but I guess, I think this is a piece of, as parents, what is...
Our job is to teach him how to be on his own.
Okay. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yes and no.
So let's get into that a little bit. What's yes, what's no?
Yes, obviously I want him to be on his own. I want him to
Do
be
you?
successful.
Do you?
Well,
I
hang on. Well, so what is yes, that's your responsibility, and no, that's not your responsibility to teach him how to live on his own successfully?
So it is our responsibility because it's, what parents do, right? Like, we get excited that, our kids go out on their own and do what they're supposed to be doing and they're successful.
Yeah.
But then no, because then I'm nervous how things are going to be like at home, or what happens if he fails and has to come back home.
But that feeling of nervousness, whose is that?
Mine.
Okay. Because that's a lot of pressure to put on, sending over that nervousness over to Greg Jr. Do you think he picks up on that?
Oh, I'm sure. I try to hide it, but I'm told that my facial expressions bring it out. So,
Sure.
Or she's nervous for him to drive. He never got a license. She just drove him everywhere he had to go.
But you
So-
could have taught him.
I wanted to, but you were too scared for him to drive.
So circle back though, I think a big piece of it is, it sounds like fear is running your life, it's running Greg Jr.'s life, and interfering with a little bit of your life too. And I'm not gonna say that doesn't have fear in your life too, but is that safe to say that the fear is kind of interrupting this place of you feeling like your role as a mother to help support him get on his own is being interrupted? Yeah? Okay. And so, is that fair?
No.
Okay. And so, I would challenge you, how do you work towards supporting him and letting that fear kind of just be there? It's a natural consequence of life, right?
Yeah, but I don't know how to do that. If I knew how to do that, I don't think we'd be here. I don't know.
Fair.
I don't
Well,
know.
and we've got plenty of sessions to unpack it, but I just really do appreciate you recognizing that one of those roles as a mother is currently not being fulfilled, which is setting your kid up for the best chance of success in life. Is that fair? Right?
Sure.
Okay. And so it sounds like that's a goal that you guys both kind of agree on.
Yeah.
Okay.
For myself, I do. All he wants is for him not to be there, so.
I never said he can't live there. I said you have to stop bringing him his breakfast in bed, and he needs to help around the house do his own laundry. He's 21 years old. Can he do laundry?
But can you do laundry?
Well,
I do
hey,
yours.
because Greg, I do want to kind of jump over to you for a second and ask, what do you think is helpful to support your son. I mean, I guess let me first ask, is there any possibility where Greg Jr. does move out where we're currently at?
Not currently, no.
You're unwilling, where are you at with it?
I just think he needs more time.
I'm okay if he's staying sober, that he lives in the house, but he needs to be productive.
Okay. And you know, we've identified for you, well, I guess let me jump back. What's a way that can help the family system, I guess the parental system, the family system jump in, you fulfilling your role that you identified to help move him into adulthood?
I mean, I guess setting myself back a little bit and not being so involved in doing things.
Okay.
Not taking him breakfast in bed.
Okay. And for you, like, what's something that you're gonna be able to work towards to start putting yourself on a priority list?
I mean, not doing a lot of things for him will help me do that.
What are you gonna do with that time?
I don't know.
Okay. What's a place to start?
I mean, I can go get my hair done. I haven't got my hair done in years, so.
Okay. Good goal.
You could go out with your husband.
Is that something you'd like?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you think about ways that you could maybe contribute to Greg Jr., that maybe frees up time for you guys to start connecting a little bit more.
I could teach him to drive.
I mean, that'd be ideal for him to get a job. I mean, he'd be able to go further, not have to wait hours on the bus.
And so what is one thing that you didn't get from your childhood that you'd like to give to Greg Jr.?
I want him to feel like he can do or be whatever he wants, just not a drug addict.
Sure. And so that idea of reinforcing maybe that belief that you just want him to be happy. How do you think you would implement that?
I think him being happy is her taking care of him. I don't want that happy. He needs to find another happy.
How do you implement that support for him so that he feels internally?
Maybe be there for him and don't put so much pressure.
Well, hang on, because I want to hear from Greg.
Yeah, I mean, if we spend time together and I don't talk about just getting a job.
Okay. Maybe asking what his interests
We
are.
used to like to go to the baseball games and stuff together, and maybe do something like that.
Okay. So spending more free time, not with lists of things that he needs to do. And so back to your childhood, I mean, that's not something that you got, right? Okay. Anyway, I'm interested to, I guess kind of work to talk about the anxiety that's present within, you know, y'all's nuclear family, right? And so, from what I'm gathering is maybe it's previously been you, Greg Jr., against Dad. Is that kind of what we've set up, just with the presence of conflict, addiction?
I'd say that's fair.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah.
Okay. And so one thing that we know with kind of that enmeshment family system, right, and having 2 versus 1, it's a lot of that can be due to mix of feelings that are, you know, internalized and passed around, and it's a big question of, are these even ours? You know, I think you were able to identify that maybe some of your childhood is getting passed to Greg Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to identify that your childhood is getting passed to Greg Jr. And so working together as a team to not allow this triangulation to happen for Greg Jr. to enlist one of you guys. I think what is something that you would find effective?
I'll let you answer that because I always do all the talking.
Well, I think we need to be on the same page. Like, I can't say something and then you go around and do something else.
But maybe discussing it a little bit differently instead of, I feel like I'm constantly getting, but you always protect him, you always do this, and what about internalizing things differently and then discussing it versus just pointing fingers and blaming people?
So you're gonna talk to him about doing chores?
Yeah.
Well, I think kind of what just happened right there is what maybe Rochelle's talking about, right? And so you're gonna help him talk about chores. I think that's
This is
finger
we.
pointing.
Why don't we talk to him about
Well,
it?
what?
Because then he starts getting like all these excuses and then you're like, oh yeah, we could start it again next week.
But okay, so a big piece though is like you guys being a team is how do we be individuals as well, right? And so instead of going back and forth of you do this, it's recognizing what can I do? And so what's something you could do?
I can ask you when you're ready to do that. We can have the conversation. So if you need more time before you want to do that with him, I can wait.
Okay.
Sometimes, this is a suggestion, but something that's helpful sometimes is having like a code word so you're not enhancing that emotional frustration, right? And so maybe being able to recognize in the moment, maybe I need to check in with how am I feeling? What's coming up for me? Yeah. Okay. So how are you guys feeling right now about kind of what we've talked about, moving with Greg Jr., y'all's relationship?
I mean, I'm nervous but excited at the same time. I mean, I'd like to see things be different because we're definitely at the age to where we should be able to go and do things and not worry about the kids so much. And, you know, and I mean, if he starts doing the things he's supposed to be doing, we can go out to dinner like he wants to, and we can go do those things.
And what if he doesn't?
Then, I mean, how would we be able to trust him to be at home?
So do you think you should be at home?
No, he can be at home. I'm just like, if he goes down a bad path, like how are we gonna do? That's my fear. Is I worry about what could happen versus what is happening.
What help are you is if he goes downhill and you go with him?
None.
None. So how do you take care of yourself?
I mean, I'm trying to say that we can possibly do things, but
Okay.
it's too much at one time.
Sure. Baby steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I heard hair done,
Mm-hmm.
and so being able to maybe start working on
So
other
if,
self-care things.
when can we go to dinner? When he's 6 months sober, a year? Like, what do we have to do?
I mean,
here?
his sobriety date doesn't have anything to do with us going out to dinner. I think it's us getting along. Honestly, I don't want to sit at a dinner table with you if we're not getting along because we're constantly arguing about him, and then dinner's going to be ruined because all we're going to talk about is him.
Can I give you a rule? What if you went to dinner and didn't talk about Greg Jr. at all?
That'd be amazing.
It would be absolutely amazing.
Okay. With the code word in there, and maybe we don't say Greg Jr. at all. If somebody brings it up, they have to pay.
Well, I mean, I don't work, so he has to pay anyway.
Okay. Maybe you owe him a massage or something.
Maybe I'll massage your feet since I don't ever touch those things.
That's a good agreement, good compromise, right? No, I think that's important, you guys being
She just
able to.
smiled.
She did just smile. What's coming up for you?
Nothing. I mean, it's just nice being able to laugh. I don't feel like it's a thing that happens between us.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that we still have that.
I think I can clearly see from the both of you guys that you want to just have a relationship between the two of you again. Yeah. And that's where Greg Jr. came from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so so I'll have you turn to each other, and I'd love for both of you guys to kind of share something that you recognize that is hard for them and something that they excel at.
So I understand that it's hard for you to see me coddling our son, but I do feel like you carry yourself really well in the situation, and you've definitely stuck around when you didn't have to.
So I want to even further, okay, I'm going to dig for you. So I would like for you to use the phrase, and this is to help work with communication, right? When you, I feel. So when you, something positive, right? When you, X, I feel, Y.
When you come to me about things, I feel like I'm still important to you.
When you put everyone else's needs above your own, I just feel so thankful that you're my wife and that you're the person that you are.
Appreciate that.
How did that feel for you guys?
Good. I feel like it was a little hard, but it was good.
Yeah. And the cool thing
It's good to
is-
hear.
Yeah. And being able to utilize that, there's not so much finger pointing, you know? Works to recognize nobody can make you feel a certain way, you know? And so it's like, here's this emotion that's coming up for me. And this is a process, you know, and it's change happens slightly over time. And again, I think a big piece of you guys coming in here, being vulnerable, is super important for you guys to continue to heal, you know, but showing up here is half the battle, and that's huge. I can see a lot of love between you guys, love for your son, this desperation almost that you guys want to get back to a place that's supportive and strong. Sometimes that can be a gift.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of lost hope. This was like the 4th time that he's come home. And so I'm glad that you made this appointment, because it feels like a little hope back in our lives that maybe we could do it differently this time.
Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that this is, you know, Greg Jr., the whole thing is going to be a success, but recognizing these patterns that have moved from generation to generation, being able to acknowledge them and accept them, get to a place where you guys can hopefully break some of those patterns or maladaptive behaviors that you use to kind of cope with a lot of the survival that you've used on your own.
I think it will be good to bring him in once we figure out our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be good so then we can figure out ways to do things with him differently, versus obviously the way we're doing things isn't working. So
Well, I mean, it's not that they weren't working, right? But you guys getting on the same pages is probably going to make things operate a lot smoother. And so, can you? And I'll start with you, Greg Sr. Identify something you learned about yourself today.
I think that I need to figure out how to push my son or parent my son, and also have time with him that's just having fun with him. That we haven't done that in a long time.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is have these values that are important to you, and also change some of the parenting that you were taught.
Doesn't always have to be a learning lesson.
Okay. And for you, what's something you learned about yourself?
Mine would be that I'm a bigger pushover than what I guess I thought that I was.
Okay. So it's new information for you. I mean, are you able to also recognize, I guess, a challenge? Where do you think that comes from?
I mean, it definitely comes from my childhood.
Yeah.
But I mean, when the reflective team was going over things, I definitely realized that being a caretaker my whole life has been a thing. So
Yeah.
that's all that I've seen in myself. So
Yeah. I mean, and again, like you guys being able to recognize how these systems have continued to play out, and that awareness is where we get to start with change. So I really appreciate you guys coming in, and I think it'd be a great idea to bring Greg Jr. next time, or maybe the third time, and keep exploring y'all's relationship.
Thank you.
so awkward. I hate it.
You guys help me at the end.
Sorry.
Alright. Totally walking over just after pause. Alright, how to go?
Good. I think I'm glad I practiced Bowen, because I think in general in crisis situations, I don't think Bowen, even though it is modern, is what I'm most familiar with. And so I felt kind of more like a knee jerk of like, okay, what do I need to bring up to talk about Bowen? And so that was great awareness for me. I felt very like in the beginning, like, oh shit, I forgot how chaotic that addiction, like how this brings this dynamic in. But once I found my groove, I felt good about it. And then I did kind of find myself uncomfortable with like the amount of time. Like I like being in control, and so I'm like, okay, well, are you gonna end it? So I guess being mindful of my time too, of like, I don't know, it felt good. I mean, it was scarier going into it than being in it, I guess, for me. That's all I got.
Alright. So saw a lot of good foundational skills, certainly some gatekeeping, doing a fair amount of gatekeeping between the two of them, summarizing, checking in, making sure that like what you're saying to them, that they're on track with what you're sharing. Clearly you actually named like a triangle, so you're addressing triangulation there.
Sure.
Noting that Junior comes between them. Let's see. Obviously, focus on intergenerational patterns with family of origin. Let's see. At the moment, I guess it wasn't necessarily intergenerational, but I think the sort of the underlying ingredients that get you to greater levels of self-differentiation
Yeah.
are increased self-awareness and insight.
Yeah.
So the question, what makes you feel safe and secure, was a question that seemed to get Rochelle really thinking. She said, I don't know. I'm always thinking of others and I don't take care of myself. And I just thought that was like one of those moments where it's not the answer, it doesn't change everything, but it gets the person to start going, huh, yeah, okay, yeah. They're starting to think about it. More gatekeeping, hang on, quote back, quote down. I guess the airplane metaphor was interesting. And I guess the only nuance I would offer there is that I wondered, like, it worked, it got her to understand, I guess, what you were getting at. And I was wondering if there were a way to also get there through I guess a more direct effort to connect the family of origin stuff to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that and this is just my brain psyching me out. Like, I would have loved to have been like, you need Al-Anon, you know? and I was trying to stay away from that because I didn't want to just bring in like, here's my chemical dependency license. And so, I guess, and not being too direct with what's the solution, but I feel like in these systems, a lot of times, like, like most people don't know what Al-Anon is or how
Yeah.
prevalent it is. And
Well,
so,
and this is considered, like, this is not solution-focused therapy, this is considered,
Directed.
you know, it could be, like, they would say, like, you're always working on becoming more self-differentiated, so you could be doing this therapy for years. And so, like, just thinking about that, I felt like the airplane metaphor kind of worked to get her to recognize that, and I think it was also kind of like packaged, like you did the packaging, and said, here's a way to understand what you're doing, and I guess, you know, to focus on process with Bowen, it would be to put it more on her.
like asking her the questions about if I was to implement the airplane.
Sure, or perhaps, I guess, again, it's all, could be just stylistic.
Sure.
If you do have that airplane metaphor, I would be curious about wondering about ways in, like her life where that was applicable to her, or what it was like growing up where her mom was just not, you know, not doing anything to care for her. Like she was, you know, or maybe, I don't know what the metaphor would be for mom. It's like mom, in terms of addiction, like I got my thing on here, I'm doing great, sorry you're having a rough time over there. Like what's the comparison?
But it
right?
is that, right? And so it's like, I guess as a 10-year-old, that's so hard. That's so hard. As being that young. Fucked up, dude, sorry.
I think this is kind of what you were getting towards, but just as a, you know, just thinking about the case, and I meant to ask this in the team, but
Yeah.
didn't, so I apologize. Probably more so for Greg, because I think a lot of the folks had been on Rochelle.
Sure.
Was what if Junior's best chance of recovery entails more engagement from Greg and less engagement from Rochelle?
My only challenge to that is the big ticket item for addiction is it has to be about Greg Jr. Like, there's nothing that the two of these can do that's going to help Greg Jr. other than back up and get out of his way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my firm belief is about addiction. And so I was really trying to stay away from them having any role in his recovery because they can't be responsible for his recovery, or it's never going to work, and they're going to freaking feel like failures.
Well, so I guess where my head was at was it in terms of like with the addiction is one thing. So when the
Yeah.
addiction is in the equation, have you had Dr. Pate for anything?
Has what?
Dr. Pate, we had him for anything?
Yeah.
So,
Dr. Pace?
Pate.
Oh,
Pace.
Pate, he's my faculty advisor,
Yeah.
so I've talked to him.
Yeah, so his I think he's still with the site.
Yeah,
that-
he is.
That works with adolescents and substance abuse and their families. And they use like a structural / narrative
Yeah.
hybrid. And the framework that they use is essentially, what does it do to the family system when the addiction enters the equation?
Yeah.
And how does it organize, begin organizing and reorganizing
It's a
relationships?
parasite.
And so to me, it's clear that he has checked out because of the addiction. She's openly engaged because of the addiction. And so I'm not thinking of it in terms of whether or not he can do enough to save his son. I'm simply thinking about, you know, what kind of relationship he wants with his son.
Right.
And what, because he's cut off, to use
Right.
the Bohemian language.
Right.
He's cut off, she's fused.
Mhm.
And so how do we potentially shift him to a place where he can be more engaged, and maybe in the context of addiction, be a resource as opposed to being cut off.
Yeah.
You know, and then for mom to back off so that she's not in that enabling role.
I would have loved to do more. I think I overthought it, right? Because there is a big piece too of like the disease of addiction. Like I genuinely believe it's a family disease. You know, if one person is addicted, the whole family's got trauma, and there's symptoms from the whole party. And so I guess I think I normally always talk about that, and I think I overthought it, which I think is also natural being in this setting.
Yeah, I talked about I statements at the break. I think that was something that probably could have been integrated a little earlier. You kind of wrapped it in at the end in
Yeah.
terms of the kind of the warm and fuzzy. And I think it's particularly useful when they're escalating because it gets them out of the agitating and finger pointing.
Yep.
So
Totally hear that.
food for thought there.
I'm never gonna admit that it's my fault.
It is your fault. Just kidding.
So I think there was a moment where I think you were going for insight, but it was kind of, you know, with the wrong person.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So you said, how do you think Rochelle's experiences impacts her efforts to parents? And then Greg was like, well, yeah, I totally think that her family origin influence impacts her parenting, right? But the model isn't about his awareness;
I
it's
know.
about her awareness, right? So.
Yeah, I see that. It's hard. It's effective. It's hard.
There's so much.
It's easy.
Just an interesting comment that Greg made. It says, our job is to teach him how to be on his own.
Yeah.
And I thought, is it? Right? So if you're
Kinda.
talking about the family system and addiction, like part of the struggle with it is that families teach us how to be together as well as, you know, like how to relate and connect. And that's what Bowen talks about is that families teach us how to relate. And so he's like, this militant, he has to go out and do everything on his own. It's like, well, isn't it also important to know how to connect and be with people at the same time? While he's saying it from a cutoff position. Right?
Very true. Very true. Good eye. But it is. I'm just kidding.
This is why he's the professional.
Yeah. At every turn, like
That's what I was gonna say.
comment, he's like, oh yeah, and like here's something to add to it, and you're like, dang.
Well, and again, like this is not stuff to, you know, to do in like a single session. It's bigger picture. Like this process is going to be stretched
Really
over
long.
Yeah.
6 months, maybe a year.
Yep.
Right? I kind of would agree with your sentiment of kind of like getting a little itchy about wanting things to happen.
Yep.
And I think it like I think it was toward the end. And I just wrote down less explaining, more process. Right?
I gave up. I was like, I know I can talk. Yeah, no, I totally recognize that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you did well, and I think structural would be your
I do too.
Because there's a lot, I if you got that from the literature, like there's a lot that Mnuchin, to use his own language, he stole from Bowen.
Yeah.
So he said, he goes, when I see something I like, I steal it. And I bring it over to my model.
Yeah.
And so his model takes a lot of the stuff from Bowen, like what Bowen calls differentiation, Mnuchin calls autonomy.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
triangulation and coalition.
Yeah.
That's
Well, triangulation is still ported over,
Yeah.
but like there's, you know, fusion becomes enmeshment.
Yep.
Cutoff becomes, you know, disengagement.
Yeah.
And rigid boundaries and things
Yep.
like that. And so there's a lot that's brought over, but it's much more focused on like the current process.
Right.
And dynamics.
I do like that better.
And probably one of the best examples I saw was actually somebody doing like it was like one of the master's videos that you see on VHS with all the static running across the middle. Was somebody doing strategic therapy, and one of the questions had like a Q&A process at the end, and the person said, you know, why is it that you didn't dig into stuff and like the causes of this stuff, and he said, well, if we're truly systemic thinkers, we understand that all that stuff is going on and it's alive in the moment because we have that systemic perspective, and that unless we sort of work on interrupting it now, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
So.
And important to like, I do believe, that's why I think I was comfortable doing Bowen is, I mean, like that is the systemic. It's like super black and white. System thinking, point it out to the client. So, yeah. Love it. Good shit.
Thoughts or questions from everybody else?
And I need to look into,
That one.
yeah. I think I might like it.
I thought you did awesome. Oh, sorry.
Some of the times when you were explaining, I thought it was good though, because it made me feel like, I think if I was in the seat and you hadn't said some of the education pieces, I would have been like, well, do you know what it's like to have a son that's on drugs?
Yeah.
And so you did, make me feel like you were the.
Well, you basically did in the beginning. You were like, this is stupid. Why are we talking about it? This has
I
nothing to do
appreciate
with
that.
it.
That was a good.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
It felt real.
Yeah.
Clients would do that, yeah.
Well, and I really think that in this situation, they are here to help us. We can't help
Right.
you help us. And so for you to be like, because I thought your personality was awesome. I thought you came through. I thought like if this were me, I thought I would just love how engaging you were and informative. I thought, I mean, I don't, that was great.
Yeah,
That's great.
piggybacking off that, the saying you've got a lot of body language when you're with them. And you kind of, when something's important, you're up straight and you're into it.
I'm
and you're
terrified to
moving
watch that
forward.
one.
So yeah, I mean,
No,
but
it's
it's good, but you're actively engaged.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're supposed to validate, but you did. I mean, like I think everybody kind of validates because you just want them to know your presence. I don't
Right.
know, maybe I don't know how that exactly works with some of these models. But anyway, I know EFT you do, but you still are building that therapeutic relationship. And I loved even when
Right.
she was saying that about she was only 11 years old and you were like, oh, you're really young to be experiencing that, and you really like leaned forward and like let her know or whatever. But I mean, there was just validation and very expressive. So good.
This is for the parents. When she would cut you off and be like, and then like stop you, how did you guys feel? Like especially like the first time.
The same thing actually.
Like,
Yeah.
because like when we look at everyone else's opportunity to go up there, everyone was like, but she was like very direct, like, no, I'm talking to this person.
I didn't feel
I
it
was
at all.
fine with
No.
it,
Okay.
yeah.
That's good. I was sitting as like a
It wasn't
bystander. I was
bad.
like, if that was me, that might offend me.
Yeah,
just like the
that's what I
level of
thought
like, hey,
too.
stop talking. I'm like, whoa, I'm an adult. You know, I was talking to a 5-year-old. Like I feel like that might, but like, yeah, you got to cut him off somehow. So I was.
But
I
I
was
think it's what she followed up with. though.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
If she didn't follow up the way that she followed up, I probably would have been like,
Right, yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
she followed up really well after she was like, hold on, let's go to whatever it was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because she did do it a couple times.
It was
so
a
I
fine
think
line.
that-
That's why I said like I wasn't sure because you were really right on the line. But
Yeah.
someone else, like, I think she did. I think she navigated that pretty well. But yeah, it's like
Was that
just
part
be
of-
aware of it.
Is that part of the theory to be so like, or is that just you?
That's just me. Well, it's just me, and like I do work with families that do struggle with addiction, so they do come in fucking hot.
Yeah.
And so you do have to be like, hey, I'm in charge.
Very
Yes.
tough exterior. Well, one of the things that, and we've talked about this in residency one, is, when you were like, can I challenge you for a second? Like,
Yeah.
you just don't hold back. And they didn't seem to be affected by that negatively. So I really
It was a
appreciate
tough situation, and the challenge part like felt like
That
we were
one I
getting
felt
to
a
it.
little, yeah.
Really?
I was
Yeah.
kind of like sat there for a minute, like, all right, fine. challenge
Especially
me
being
about
the
it.
grumpy husband over there.
I know.
And
I thought about saying hell no.
I recognize too that like I usually use that pretty like tauntingly. So
Yeah.
I think there's a more graceful way to implement that, but usually I think the can I challenge you is super effective.
No, I
I
like
do
it.
it tauntingly.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I like it. I like it. It's like, hey, can I bring up a tough subject? Is that
Yeah.
okay if we do that?
I
like
do
it.
think that the tone, there was a couple times when you did do it, the
Yeah.
tone was just maybe a little.
Absolutely.
But you were excited. I think it was like, wait a minute, I'm onto something. Like you were excited about it,
Yeah.
and then so it didn't feel like you were frustrated.
She
You're
seemed
just
passionate.
excited.
She
Yeah,
seemed
yeah,
passionate.
passionate. Yeah, but I know. Yeah.
She seemed
That is-
passionate about it.
Yeah, I
feel
agree.
like you had so much of you in it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and I genuinely really appreciated that.
Mhm.
Because I didn't get to watch you in track one very much, and
Mm-hmm.
you're a very good therapist.
Yeah,
You
very
missed
good.
out.
Very good.
Yeah, we got caught. I think a lot of us got caught too in this. Like, we want the client to talk a lot more than we, so we were like, how can we say 2 words and make them say 40, right?
Yeah.
And you were not scared to like say like, hey, let me help you a little bit here, and that was
Yeah.
cool. It was very cool to watch that. It
Cool.
made me feel like, hey, maybe I'm allowed to talk a little bit more, you know?
Sure,
It's cool.
yeah. Well, thank you.
This is for the parents again. After hearing the reflective team, did you feel like some of the things that were talked about in the reflective team, would you have wished that to be spoken? I mean, you know, by Sydney? No?
Not really, I think she did good. I think she was good about getting information out and I think she did a good job.
What do you
of that.
mean?
No, well, I mean, you hit on the points, but I was feeling like with you, Rochelle, like I think there was still part of you that wanted to say something, but you didn't say it.
That's because that story was true.
Oh,
My mom was a drug addict when I was young, and
It was, okay.
so I tread very lightly on it because I felt it,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want it to come out all the
Yeah.
way and have that.
No.
And I think she saw that in me too when I was doing it, because she was like, "Shit."
I knew, and that's why, and I didn't wanna.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's kind of hard though, the reflective team, and maybe because you guys haven't been a reflective team, but there's some things that they say that I thought was kind of too much for me to hear. I don't know, like, or too blaming or,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
In your experience with having reflective teams, like, cause I tried to do it a little bit when I was reflecting too, but do some of the clients come back like, that was so fucking rude?
Oh, I think it can happen just because, like, even if things are couched in the most, benign way, people can just,
Right,
they'll
defend.
they'll read something into it and get defensive. But yeah, I think there's room to, improve from, like, I think, as Dr. Maoni had said, being mindful of our inner pathologist, right, and speaking to that a little bit, like when we're talking about clients that are observing us, talking about them.
It'd probably be different too, we'd all act different if we were real clients here.
But you did, and when you were,
Yeah.
you were like, I was being attacked, like you, because it is,
Yeah.
you're being talked about like you're not there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, it is a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just an interesting dynamic. I know
Yeah,
this is a very
yeah.
popular thing to
Yeah.
do, especially in masters.
I thought your question toward the end was I think a shift away. Well, I don't know if it was a shift away, but I just thought it was a nice emphasis on them. I think you were talking to Rochelle at the time. Said, what do you think you, put that in asterisks, can do to help with this dynamic in the home? And so it's kind of like a flip of encouraging the I statements.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're kind of directing her to think about. So we've talked about this issue of perhaps doing too much and not giving yourself oxygen and so forth. And so what do you think might be helpful for you to do in the home, as opposed to, why are you such a jerk, Greg? And why don't you help me with our son, right?
Yeah.
So
I think I wrote that down too. Was that when she said, instead of what you can do, what can I do? Was that what you wrote down? Like when she was like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Not or what can I do? It's not what he can do, what can I do?
Right.
Is that what she was, I wrote that down. I thought that was really good.
but you had asked her specifically, what can you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I forgot about that I was supposed to be doing that the whole first half. I was like,
I wrote it down.
you.
Greg, was there more to your history you were gonna drop on us if we went there, or what? Or just you just had an idyllic childhood?
No, I would have went there like that, we had to do whatever our dad said. We
Yeah.
couldn't play,
It's like
couldn't.
we had a good childhood, it was fine, we were
Yeah.
ahead, we had a house.
Sorry.
We got beat if we got on a line, it was good.
Right.
It's
Yes,
no big deal,
definitely.
right? So, I felt like that was in there, and I was like,
Yeah.
come on, Greg, come on.
I was gonna kind of drop like that when we were in high school, you would like come over or whatever, like how bad your childhood was, so I couldn't really
Oh.
complain about my,
I definitely, and I've seen and I've heard several people talk about it. It does feel like you are on fire. Let me extinguish this fire the
Yeah.
whole hour.
Yeah.
Super true.
So
Therapy or Bowidian therapy?
my internal therapist was like, I gotta help here. you know,
Oh, I see
and
what
like,
you're saying. Okay,
Right.
sorry.
And when
I
you
didn't
come back for the
know
second part, you're like, I gotta solve something, like, you really go, at least for me, I was like, okay, when do we
Yeah.
get, I
All
don't wanna
right.
just
Let's
leave,
fix it.
like, we just talked, there's no.
yeah.
The only part that wasn't true about that is I don't have a 21-year-old addict living at home.
But you've had a brother-in-law.
Yeah, my brother-in-law we did take care of, so that's where that part came from.
Yeah.
I thought this was a great case because it
Yeah.
was so diverse compared to other
Mhm.
cases, so it was nice
Very
to see.
different. Cause it wasn't a conflict really between them, and kind of, right, it was more about Greg
It was more
Junior,
about
and
the
so it was
addiction
like,
and
so
the-
you were watching what it would look like to have, we're here because of our son, not we're here because of really us.
And I like how you switched that back to the addiction portion of it too, because it definitely could have been husband and wife issue, not addiction issue, that we were going through at the house, if that makes sense, like with the way that we started arguing at the beginning.
That.
All the anticipation of sitting over there this whole time has built up until I sat
Yeah.
here.
That would have, I felt it internally when y'all were, I was like, holy crap, here we go.
I mean, my husband and I used to argue about my brother-in-law all the time, but I wanted to strangle him, but at the same time, my brother was his caretaker growing up, so it was.
He owed him.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think it's mellow compared to clients that you will deal with.
Well,
Like,
that's the,
clients that I, like,
I prefer working with families than I do with clients because I do think clients are so much more chaotic
Yeah.
and that are struggling with addiction.
and it's so heightened.
Mm-hmm.
And victim. Everybody did this to me.
Yeah.
So, last nugget I'll offer you here is, I think you had helpful clients toward the end.
I totally agree.
And like, I just thought, it's, like I said, it's nice to feel like something is happening when they're talking about, oh, let's do this little thing at home and
Yeah.
let's plan a date and like that, where they're kind of helping you out. But like a Bohemian therapist would be like, no, this is surface stuff. Like you
Let's
need
get
to
deeper.
do the work, like around family awards and stuff and that. So
It just felt like the time was like literally moving like a snail
Yeah.
at that moment, so I was like, shit, maybe if I just say something it'll help her and like get it.
So
I don't
would
know,
you-
it just felt so slow.
I mean, when you get a couple like this, I mean, you just like, I guess maybe it does look like you just gatekeep for a couple sessions until, I mean,
gatekeep, get them to own their own position.
Okay,
That's the
that's
biggest
fair.
thing, is getting them to get out of that antagonistic cycle and to say, you talk about your experience and your feelings, as opposed to you. So,
yeah.
I think it's time for break. So,
Thank you.
Yahoo!
What would've made it fun is if you'd have another kid named Greg the Third.
Oh my gosh,
That's what I
when
was
she
hoping.
said that, I was like, oh shit.
I was like, oh, this is gonna be fun.
I got confused. I was
Greg,
like,
yeah.
we gotta